This is Richard Lamb, the author of Biografeats, Life Lessons of Courage, Perseverance, and Triumph. This book contains 24 stories of 12 women and 12 men who built up the courage and persevered over tremendous adversities on their journey to achieving great success. I love to share a few stories from my book. These stories inspired me, and I hope they inspire you. The title of this story is Climb as High as You Can. As a kid, Percival was physically below average. I was generally smaller and weaker than most of my fellow pupils, and never became fully involved in school sports or other activities, he said. Even if Percival wanted to participate, Mom didn't allow any fun and games. She was afraid that he might hang out with the wrong crowd. So instead of playing games, Percival received a great deal of instruction, which he greatly benefited from his mother. Mother was a woman of admirable character and gave me the affection and encouragement I needed, he said. On the other hand, Dad's strict standards did not always agree with his rebellious young son. All through his teenage years, Percival got into heated arguments that quite often resulted in disciplinary action. My father believed in the necessity of corporal punishment, and we had many memorable confrontations in the woodshed, he remembered. To escape from his parental pressures, Percival often wandered into his imaginary world and conjured up wild dreams and fantasies in which he always played the hero. But whatever confidence he had about his physical appearance, it was soon shattered by his high school gym teacher. He placed me in the misfit class with the other physical freaks and devoted his main attention to the more adequately equipped schoolboys. I developed a feeling of inferiority about my physique, which has remained with me to this day. It wasn't an inferiority about what I could achieve, but a solid conviction about how appalling I looked, he said. In his spare time, Percival devoured books at a rate of one per day over a period of time. His favorites always had something to do with adventure. Up to now, Percival was still considered to be a puny little kid. Then, to everyone's surprise, his scrawny physique underwent a rapid transformation. He grew 5 inches one year and 4 inches the next. His lean muscles got stronger. By the time he graduated from high school before reaching 16, he was doing a man's work at the family honey business, which owned 1,600 beehives. During harvest season, Percival handled thousands of 90-pound boxes of honeycomb for extraction and endured his daily dosage of a dozen or more bee stings. In the summer, the family worked every day of the week from dawn to dusk, frequently late into the night. I worked hard for some years in the business without receiving any pay, not even pocket money, Percival recalled. He had to beg his father for money so that he could go on a 10-day vacation with a friend. For 2 years, he went to college, but then dropped out to work full-time for his father. When his country, New Zealand, declared war on the Japanese, Percival immediately applied to join the Air Force to be a pilot. For the longest time, flying offered everything that he wanted: adventure, independence, and freedom. Shortly thereafter, he withdrew his application because his conscience told him that it was wrong to kill. So the beekeeper begrudgingly buzzed back to the beehives. I was very restless and unhappy, and the first few years of the war were the most uncertain and miserable of my life, Percival recalled. He was working very hard, but as usual, Percival had little time for entertainment. By summer 1940, the 20-year-old desperately needed a break. So he convinced his dad to let him go on a short trip with a friend to a famous resort called the Hermitage in the southern Alps of New Zealand. There, sitting in the lounge that first evening, Percival overheard something that piqued his interest. Whispers swirled the room about the two men who just walked in. The word was that these adventurers had just climbed Mount Cook, the highest mountain in New Zealand. Listening quietly in a corner, the young beekeeper was overcome with envy. "Tomorrow I must climb something," Percival proclaimed. Following the footsteps of their guide, Percival and his companion reached the summit of Mount Oliver, a small peak above the Hermitage. The feeling of freedom and exhilaration gained by climbing to the top was the happiest moment of his life. As time passed, Percival's thoughts once again turned to the Air Force. By now, his school friends were in the service, and his enthusiasm for adventure was too great to be challenged. At the beginning of 1944, his life of adventure took off when the Royal New Zealand Air Force called. Between military trainings, Percival pursued his new passion. Week after week, Percival went climbing either by himself or with a friend, and conquered one peak after another. By Christmas 1944, he felt ready to climb Mount Cook. But when he got a closer view of it and saw its large faces covered with thick ice, he retreated with cold feet. "I built up quite a lot of confidence over the previous year, but now I realize how little I really knew," Percival admitted. He wasn't aware of life-threatening dangers such as crevasses or deep crevices and avalanches. After a serious boating accident, Percival was discharged from military duty and returned home to recuperate from his severe burns. Thereafter, he resumed his beekeeping duties and favorite pastime. Up until now, Percival had learned mountain climbing techniques only through books and alpine journals. He had no instructor until he met Harry Aries, one of New Zealand's legendary climbers. Harry taught Percival a great deal about safe yet aggressive mountaineering. One day in the summer of 1947, the two went out and reached the apex of Mount Cook at 12,329 feet. "Many of my best days were spent with Harry Aries, and many of my best climbs done under the umbrella of his skill," Percival said. From that point on, Percival gained the confidence and courage to climb higher and higher. In the summer 1950, he went on a climbing trip to Switzerland and conquered Jungfrau at 13,642 feet. By then, his reputation as a mountaineer was growing. One day, a group of New Zealand mountaineers invited Percival to join them on an expedition to the Himalayas. Percival gladly accepted the invitation. The team reached an elevation of 22,180 feet before retreating from adverse weather conditions. When Percival reached the bottom of the Himalayas, there was a telegram inviting him to join the British expedition to explore the possibilities of conquering Mount Everest. No one had ever set foot on top of the world's highest mountain, at 29,029 feet. Some of the world's best climbers died trying. Falls, extreme cold, lack of oxygen, or exhaustion were the main causes. The following year, in 1952, Percival rejoined the British expedition to attempt Cho Oyu at 26,870 feet as a test run prior to attempting Everest. But they failed. Nonetheless, the team learned a great deal from the experience. A year later, the British expedition blitzed Everest with over 400 people, including 362 porters and 20 Sherpa guides who helped carry food, supplies, and equipment up the dangerous slopes. After nearly 2 months of overcoming sub-zero temperatures, blustery winds, and numerous dangerous obstacles, Percival and his Sherpa friend Tenzing Norgay made the final ascent to the top of the world at 11:30 a.m. on May 29, 1953. Percival became an instant hero. Who was this courageous mountaineer? Edmund Hillary. For 15 minutes, Edmund Hillary stood on top of the world. It was always his courage, hard work, and determination that took him to the peak of the world's highest mountains. Edmund Hillary's bio. Birth name: Edmund Percival Hillary. Birthplace: Auckland, New Zealand. Birth date: July 20, 1919. Died January 11, 2008. Age: 88 years old. Achievements: first person to reach the summit of Mount Everest. After conquering Mount Everest, he devoted much of his life to helping the Sherpa people of Nepal through the Himalayan Trust, a charity organization he founded. Many schools and hospitals were built. Quotes by Edmund Hillary. Someday I'm going to climb Everest. The mediocre can have adventures, and even the fearful can achieve. You don't have to be a fantastic hero to do certain things, to compete. You can just be an ordinary chap, sufficiently motivated. It's not the mountain we conquer, but ourselves. In some ways, I believe I epitomize the average New Zealander. I have modest abilities. I combine these with a good deal of determination, and I rather like to succeed. Each of us has to discover his own path. Some paths will be spectacular, and others peaceful and quiet. Who is to say which one is most important? For me, the most rewarding moments have not always been the great moments. For what can surpass a tear on your departure, joy on your return, or a trusting hand in yours? I was never one to obsess about the past. Too much to do in the future.